So today's show's unusual by our own standards. Usually Eric and me, we go ahead and Eric starts out with an intro, and we kind of know that we're going to go ahead and do a show or a podcast in advance. And then here today, we were just going ahead and talking on the phone, and we kind of came up with something. We said, well, let's go ahead and record what we're talking about. So this is completely ad hoc and very very interesting angle that we don't normally use. So thank you all for joining us today, and I think that today's topic is interesting because it's applicable. It's applicable to a lot of us. So we've all been victimized by the playground, and when we get victimized by the playground, whether that's at work, at home, a special interest group, wherever else it might be, it can even happen at a store or something, there's pain that goes with that. I think that there's pain. It's painful for people to experience that. Now, what happens when life gets better? What happens when things get better for us as individuals and our fortunes turn? And several things come to mind. Number one, we kind of ask ourselves, kind of like in sports, okay, when things get better, kind of like when we won a championship, have we lost our competitive edge? Is it still as important to us? Is it still on our radar? Because we definitely know the playground is still out there, and we know that it's around the corner. No matter how good our lives are right now, we know that it's around the corner. So we should be prepared ourselves, but also it's probably a good idea to keep in mind that it's important to help others as well. Let's not go ahead and change things up from doing the right things to get to where we're at, if we're at a better points, and start falling back into old habits or vulnerabilities. That's not saying that we should always have our guard up, but don't entirely let it down either, because the playground is still out there. That's number one. But then the other thing is entitlement. Have we endured enough pain where we can go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I've had this dark cloud and misfortune hanging over me for long enough. Maybe I'm entitled for some good things to happen. Maybe I'm finally reaping the rewards of these things happening. I've been blessed, whether it's people have a belief in God or whatever they believe in, the universe, energy, any number of things, maybe just luck. They just believe in luck. Hey, maybe I'm being blessed with good energy, good fortune, good luck, because I've endured enough pain in my life. So those are the two things that come to mind, kind of like, hey, are we losing our edge, and are we also feeling entitled? And neither of those things are necessarily bad things, but I think it's an interesting phenomenon, and I have some examples I want to share with everyone. And again, welcome to our show. Eric, what are your thoughts about this as we're talking about this tonight?
Yeah, I agree 100%. We strive to get over things, and once we get over the things, how do we remain connected in a way to where we have the issue at heart and we can help others that are going through what we've been through? There's also a big liability from the risk. If somebody's going through something you've gone through, do you want to run the risk of becoming a target again by trying to get involved? So yeah, it's a very sticky topic, but it's definitely going to be an interesting one.
For sure, absolutely. Now I have several examples that I was talking to on the phone before we started the podcast, and here I am recanting them right now. So I have these examples contrast with one another quite well. Let's focus on bullying right now for the moment. And I had a bullying situation in school, and I've mentioned in our previous shows that I've experienced bullying. I've experienced bullying in pretty much every way. And I'm not ashamed to admit that, because here I am, I'm a functional adult and living, at least trying to live a more or less balanced life. And I'm no better or any worse than anyone else, but I've learned a lot. I've learned from through my pain. I've learned through my mistakes. And but at the same time, I always try to reflect on, okay, what kind of person am I? Am I losing my ground? Am I losing my center? Where am I compared to where I was before? And I had several situations in school where I handled a situation that involved bullying of somebody else very differently. The first situation was a friend of mine, and I believe this was in 6th grade, and he was being bullied by arguably the biggest bully and the strongest or seemingly toughest guy in the school. I went ahead and I stood up for my friends. I got pushed on the playground. It was actually literally on the playground, not just metaphorically. And my head hit the slide. And I hit the slide that was behind me. It was made out of metal, as most slides were back in those days. Not the plastic stuff we have these days, but I digress. And what ends up happening is that I got a really big cut, and I had to get stitches. I talked to my parents about what happened afterwards. They were concerned and talked to school and everything, but they were proud of me. I think they said, "Hey, you know what? You stood up for your friend. You stood your ground, and that should have never happened to you." But I think that they reiterated that was a nice thing that I did for my friend, that I stood up for him. Then there's another situation that happened in high school years later, where I was the amount of bullying that I was getting personally was starting to taper down a little bit. I was getting a little bit more respect because I was fighting back. And I walked past a guy who I noticed that he was getting bullied by several other guys. They were making fun of him and that kind of thing. I think he may have been in special ed or something like that, and I didn't really know him too well. And yeah, they were making fun of him. I think along those lines about being a person with special needs, which, by the way, I firmly stand against anybody who bullies anybody with special needs, or anyone for that matter, but especially those people. And I think that at that point, something inside of me, I don't want to say it was complacent, but at that moment, again, I'm not speaking from a Hollywood script here, I'm speaking from real life. I decided not to get involved, I think. I noticed it, I observed it, I thought about what to do, but I decided not to get involved. And I guess in our conversation today, I'm trying to figure out why. Why did I decide to get involved? I think that maybe I was like, hey, well, I've been bullied for long enough. I've been in that drama for long enough. I don't want to go down that road again. This guy, I don't know him that well. He's not a friend of mine. But at the same time, I think that I came up to him later, maybe riding the school bus later, and I told him, I'm like, I may have said something about, hey, it was uncool what those guys were doing to you. And I just kind of went out of my way to go out and talk to him and everything. So I kind of took to the path of less resistance, I guess you could say, and tried to give him some reassurance and talk to him just to make him feel a little bit better about himself. But I decided not to go ahead and defend him outright in that bullying scenario where he was getting bullied. And I want to get your thoughts on that, Eric. All judgments aside, we're all human beings. We're all talking about it. Maybe I was feeling like, I lost my competitive edge? Or is that maybe just not? Maybe I wasn't wanting to get involved in the drama again. I was like, hey, I've dealt with this bullying stuff for long enough, and I'm in a better place now. I don't want to deal with it again. Maybe we get kind of complacent after a certain amount of time, unless it's happening to us or one of our loved ones personally. What do you think about that?
Well, knowing you how I know you, I don't think it was. In fact, I'm confident it was not because you were scared. I think it's probably because a certain part of us is so happy it's not us. It's like for once you get to not be the one being picked on. And, it's an unfortunate thing that happens to us. It doesn't make you a bad person, but, it's normal to not want to be a target again. And so that's it. First glance, what I would say it could potentially be. The other is, I don't think that we are really instructed or schooled on how to help people. How do you help people without making enemies for yourself? And how do you help them in a way that's going to last for them and be of genuine help to them, So I guess maybe systematically we don't have education about how to intervene and not just watch people get bullied.
Absolutely. And what I'm thinking is that, within your writings about the playground rules and other topics and that kind of thing, we've been talking about different roles, between the victims, the bullies themselves, the executives. Now, there was a term, if you could give myself and maybe our audience a quick refresh, there's a term that we used in there for the people who are kind of like bystanders, kind of like I was in that latter situation. We don't really want to side with the bully, but we don't want to be involved as it is because we don't want to jeopardize our standing. Now, is there a specific name that we have for those bystanders that you covered in your literature that you can recall offhand?
I'd like to read a short chapter out of the manual to give the listener a little bit of context to what's going on here, and maybe that'll help bring understanding. So this is titled Playground Rules and Ethics Phenomenon. The problem plaguing several adult organizations is causing thousands of American workers, and probably thousands more around the globe, to feel unfulfilled at their place of employment. This problem is hurting organizations in all fields as they are faced with all-time low retention rates and morale and are collectively spending millions of dollars chasing an answer that is fleeting. This problem is called the playground rules and ethics phenomenon. What makes this problem so detrimental is not that it exists, instead that its existence is unknown. This was first noticed by Coach Eric Anthony during one of his team seasons. He noticed that when not supervised and given guidance, children divided themselves into a social hierarchy where the dominant personalities controlled the game and who were allowed to play, while others were forced to either conform or be cast out. In context of the practice, he noticed certain players wouldn't pass to each other, even when the unmarked person was clearly in an excellent scoring position. In the playground rules and X phenomenon, kids will only share the ball with others they respect and like and are in the clique. None of the children on the team were willing to defy this phenomenon, lest they be excluded from the fun. Even after witnessing members of the clique treat others in a demeaning way, still the social norms hold everybody to silence. This phenomenon compelled Coach Eric to do further research, especially since his son, who was on the team, was one of those being bullied by other teammates and was also being bullied at school on the playground. Coach Eric ascertained through interviewing his son that bullies in the playground at school were also excluding him from games or giving him roles that nobody wanted, in addition to mistreating him in other ways to exert their social power over him. When bully victims come forward, they are seldom believed because there is often nobody willing to confirm their allegations. So it seems like, in this case, you weren't necessarily looking to be a tattletale, so you didn't really concern yourself with being believed, but maybe would you say that you didn't feel like intervention was not appropriate in the context of a live incident?
That's a very good point. That's a very good question. I really thank you for sharing that with us. That passage from the literature, which I read as well, and what your son experienced was within a team setting, and this was in the team setting. However, I was still kind of in this situation where I was, I really kind of had to make a choice, and especially the part like you said, if they don't go ahead and side with the bully, lest they be excluded. And maybe that was in the back of my mind, even though I wasn't really friends with the guys that were bullying him or anything. But yeah, part of it was like, I don't know if I want to go on this path again, kind of like you alluded to earlier. At least it wasn't me this time. But another part of it was just like, okay, well maybe I was, like you mentioned in your literature about being believed. With me, it wasn't so much in this specific case about not being believed. I thought people would believe me. I thought it was more along the lines of nobody would really care, Hey, I was going ahead, it's kind of like me saying, and I know that sounds very maybe skeptical or cynical, but that's just kind of like how the environment was. It was let to slip through the cracks and that kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, so here I am being bullied, and it seems like nobody really cares just about, and even the people who do care don't really know how to help me. And then I'm going to go ahead and step forward on somebody else's behalf and say, oh yeah, here's so-and-so, and he's being bullied in this kind of thing. It's like, who am I going to report that to? If I report it to a teacher, say, oh yeah, sorry that happened, or go to, or report it at home, nobody's going to really say anything, because unless it's directly relating to me, they're going to say, oh, maybe like, oh, it's a shame that anybody does that, but, just kind of like what they've been saying before, ignore them or whatever other, unhelpful advice I was given. And it's just like, I'm like, who can I really report this to who will care and actually do something about it without jeopardizing my own standing and bringing myself back into the, bringing myself back into the line of fire as far as these bullies. Now, again, that sounds like I'm doing a little bit of CYA, like hint, hint, cover my own butt. But the truth of the matter is, if I'm not friends with this guy, and he's being ganged up on by multiple people, and I know that I didn't have any help myself, like, when I reached out about being bullied to multiple entities, how am I confident what kind of confidence do I have as the bystander, if we can use such a term, that I'm going to go ahead and speak out on somebody else's behalf, and that anybody's going to help them? It's discouraging not only to the person who's being victimized, it's also discouraging to somebody who might have in different circumstances actually come in and help, or at least try to help out a little bit. What are your thoughts on that? I guess that's just where I was at with it.
That's a terrible predicament for a young lad to be in. Feeling by yourself, don't know what to do, don't want to get back under fire. In other conversations, you were talking about the time in which you had decided to intervene and it kind of backfired later. Can you give us a little bit of light on that incident?
I'm glad you brought that up because that's exactly the next thing that I was going to cover. So in the first situation, I'm that kind of person, and even I was back then, I don't expect anything out of friendship where I stick up with somebody other than a little bit of loyalty. So in the first situation, I was helping a guy out. He was a friend of mine named Jeremy. He was being bullied and that kind of thing. And like I said, I stuck up to the toughest bully in school. And what ended up happening is that, Jeremy, I got, really bad cut in my head and had to get stitches and everything. And what ended up happening is that Jeremy became more popular later than I did, even though I stuck up for him. And he started bullying me, too. He joined the bullies, actually. So he went from being a victim to being a bully himself, and he was bullying the very guy who stuck up for him because it made him seem cool. That's a terrible pivot. Nobody should ever have to deal with that. I'm not being self-sympathetic, but man, I was trying to do the right thing, and that was a terrible pivot that Jeremy pulled on me. I'm just like, that's just kind of like a stab in the back. That's not showing any loyalty whatsoever. I mean, all I asked for is a little bit of loyalty along the way. I didn't expect him to praise me or to make my family a fresh batch of cookies or anything. I just expected just a little bit of basic loyalty, and he didn't even provide that. So
you kind of see why he may have done that, or does it make no sense at all?
I think that and that's a very good question. I think that if I'm to speculate based on what happened, that many years ago, people's popularity is kind of a fleeting thing. So what ends up happening is that he wasn't that cool back then, but a lot of times people, or at least not by their standards, he was cool by my standards, but not by the standards of those bullies. But then I think he maybe had a little bit of a growth spurt, so he was taller. Then he started doing the thing which was popular at that time, started wearing like earrings, tattoos, and that kind of thing. And again, nothing wrong with doing that. But I think that he just started to kind of do the more things that the cool crowd did. And I wasn't doing that. And he was physically stronger, like I said. I think that a lot of it, like I said, was just a visual kind of characteristics. And he was more with the in crowd at that point than I was, and I think that he viewed that as an opportunity for leverage. Say, hey, you know what? I'm no longer being victimized. I'm the one who can go join the cool crowd now, and the cool crowd often bullies, as you know.
Or is it possible that, like you're saying, he saw this as a way out, and you were just more a casualty of war, so to speak? It wasn't that he intentionally wanted to subvert you and subdue you. He just said, this is my way out. Kind of like if you are saving a wounded animal that's caught in a trap, then you try and pick it up and it bites you. Is it biting you because it doesn't like you, or is it biting you just because it's a wounded animal?
Yeah, and that's a good point. If I'm to go ahead and give him the benefit of the doubt, it feels terrible to be on the receiving end of somebody who you stuck up for. But yeah, maybe the lifeline at that point was to go ahead and to bully Mark, and that would punch his ticket in with the cool crowd. So maybe he didn't mean it personally, but it certainly seemed to help with his leverage. So we've got that part, and then like I said, just and some of the things that I mentioned, the visual characteristics of him as he evolved over time, grew up, and probably a culmination of those factors. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
So to bring this segment, I guess, full circle, and maybe to conclusion, maybe not. If you were to have encountered that same incident with the wisdom you have now, knowing that you could potentially be reverted to being the victim yourself, how would you have handled it differently?
Well, I'm a different person now. I think that a lot of people have had a lot of pain throughout their lives, and again, I don't like to compare myself to others because I'm sure there's people who've had a lot tougher than me too, So, but at the same time, I will say this: is that a person is really just, like I said, that culmination of their life experiences, good experiences, bad experiences, neutral experiences, maybe just like life lessons and rewards. And those experiences were all part of the person who I've become today. Now today, I'm much more inclined. I'm physically stronger. I'm smarter. I'm not as idealistic, that kind of thing. I'd probably go ahead and stand on my ground and fight it out, knowing what I know now. I'd be smart about it, but I would go ahead and I wouldn't feel as incredibly threatened or as intimidated or as anxious as I did back then. Because right now I'm just, like I said, in every way, shape, and form, I'm a lot tougher than I was. So, but that's the Monday morning quarterback for sure. Because at that time I didn't have that confidence. At that time I didn't have that swagger, that self-esteem. And I didn't think that my opinion or my stance was really worth all that much because I kept on getting that negative feedback coming from so many different places, especially from bullies at school. But in retrospect, I will say this. If I knew that I could come forward and help somebody out like that, knowing that there was a system in place of some kind where people could support me. Not quite like a whistleblower, but maybe something along those lines where saying, hey, Mark can go ahead and come forward and talk about his witnessing somebody getting bullied, and maybe I can be anonymous or something else, and that the system that was in place would actually help the person who was getting bullied. I think that would split the difference nicely. Now again, that's not the Hollywood epic hero take on things. That's more kind of logical, knowing what I know now. I could say, hey, you know what? I want to help this person out, but I also have to worry about my own interest of staying in school and not getting suspended or expelled or any number of things. So I would say, you know what? I want to come forward and help this person. But it's the responsibility of the system of the school to say, Mark, you as a person who sees some kind of wrongdoing, you are able to come forward and help this person, speak out for this person, or speak out about what you saw without fear of retaliation. And that's a lot of the work that I've been doing to help people with special needs. Is I can go ahead and I can come forward as a mandated reporter and say, hey, this is what I witnessed, and there's hopefully a system in place that comes back and says, hey, Mark, thank you for sharing that information. We're here to help this person out. That's how I feel about it.
So in this case, the victim was special needs, so it wasn't really a fair fight, so to speak. But in situations where it is a fair fight and all things are equal, would you say current wisdom would indicate that we should only help when asked? Obviously, if someone's being pummeled and physically assaulted, that's different. But if being bullied, mistreated emotionally, is it worth getting involved?
That's a great question. And I will say this. A lot of what we've covered here when it comes to the playground and the different ways that people can be bullied, harassed, any number of things, that a lot of times, and I think we covered this in our last podcast, we were talking about communication and coming forward, is that people are afraid to come forward. So maybe that guy, or somebody's in a similar situation wouldn't want to come. He doesn't know who I am, so he doesn't think that I'd help out, or he doesn't want to ask for help, or he doesn't know how to ask for help, or he feels too anxious to ask for help. So maybe the partial side of me that's still idealistic would say, you know what, it's still nice to go ahead and swoop in and say, hey, leave my friend alone, kind of thing. I would love to do that. I would love to be able to do that, and like I said, know that there's a system at my back that would protect me. But I think in this case, like I said, I think that people who are bullied, they're discouraged that anybody's going to help them out. Like at some point, yeah, I had people defend me in my life a few times when I was bullied, but at some point it was just kind of like I felt like, you know what, nobody's going to come forward for me anymore. Nobody's going to advocate. Nobody's going to have my back. Even my friends are going to turn on me. So I think that sometimes it's nice to be proactive. And I can get off on a big tangent right now about how there's social media so prominent these days, and the only so-called courage is pseudo-courage shown by keyboard warriors and that kind of thing when it comes to defending others. But at the same time, when you defend somebody in person, there are potential repercussions. There are, people can get, like I said, suspended, expelled from school. At the same time, they can get into, they get physically hurt and that kind of thing. And again, I think that it's still important to come forward for something that we believe in selectively, because, and I emphasize selectively, because if we don't, sometimes the person who's getting hurt or bullied is not either not willing or not able to ask for help, or they just feel discouraged because they feel like nobody's going to help them. That's how I feel about it.
And a big part of the show is to encourage listeners to keep it on our radar. It seems the best people to intervene in these kind of situations are those that have gone through it. So please, if you've gone through it, don't forget how much it sucks to be going through it, and don't be afraid to lend out a helping hand when you see it going on. I know there's a lot of different concerns. There's liability concerns. We've all heard of incidents where, not in a playground setting, but there's like a traffic accident, and so we go and help them, and then they end up suing us because we hurt their neck. So, there's extreme things can go wrong when trying to help people, but I'd like to encourage people to not be calloused and to always be looking to how they can help a fellow brother or sister out. What thoughts do you have on that? How do we, despite, the never-ending story of playground rules and antics, we're always going to be victimized in some form or fashion, but how do we avoid being calloused and be proactive?
And I love what you said, and I think it boils down to kind of like pick your battles. Yeah, absolutely. We can't go ahead and be too complacent, because that's easy to go ahead and say, yeah, well, I've been through all that, and that was all in a previous life, and yeah, I'm sitting pretty now, so yeah, you'll figure out eventually, pal. It's kind of like, I was trying to go ahead and make it in the music business. It's like, a lot of these guys were established, so maybe they went ahead and they had a really successful musical careers, but maybe at the beginning they were struggling and that kind of thing. It's like you lean out to them for a helping hand. It's like, oh yeah, they don't want to help you out because at that point they're saying pretty, and I think that's kind of like sometimes that's human nature. Dare I say that sometimes people are a little bit to be a little bit selfish, or to not want to make the time, or to have different priorities. Again, no judgment intended, but I think that sometimes there's a really big gap between people in terms of the recognition and that type of thing, or the amount of assistance that they receive because people lose that edge where they don't want to help as much or be involved as much. So it's a good example of that. Forgive me for the quick tangent, but when you hear people speaking about having these diseases and contributing to different societies and that kind of thing, cancer society, that kind of thing, they may not be big spokespeople for those things, right? But as soon as it happens to them, then you see how involved they get. You see that especially with celebrities. If one of them has something like Parkinson's disease, heaven forbid, or something else, cancer, something that they know, then they go ahead and they start becoming more prominent there. Now, again, that's not saying anything bad about them. It just means that as soon as the problem is in your own backyard or happening to a loved one, it becomes a bigger priority for you. So at the same time, we can't possibly help all aspects of humanity with every cause, but yes, it's very important to keep on the grid with this. Try to help people where you can. Pick your battles selectively. Don't knowingly jeopardize, yourself or any of your loved ones, anybody who's important to you. And don't be afraid. Like I said in the last podcast, do not be afraid to speak up, because as long as the bullies' voices are louder than ours, then we're going to let them win. We have to have it so that our voices are louder than theirs. If anybody has ever been bullied, harassed, overlooked for a promotion, that kind of thing. These websites, these avenues, Glassdoor for, a job, for workplaces, or, whatever else type of sites, forums, that kind of thing, where people speak out. These people can't get away with it, and we have to speak up, but at the same time, again, we can't get involved in every fight. We have to pick our battles. And I'll go back to what I said in summary here about complacency and entitlement. So you don't want to be complacent, but at the same time, maybe we are entitled to a little bit of enjoyment in our lives and a little bit less pain, because we've already endured the pain. We've already been down that road before. So even if we feel like we don't have the same fire that we did before, it doesn't mean it doesn't have to be in our radar, and doesn't mean that the fire still doesn't doesn't still linger or doesn't still burn underneath it all somewhere else. It means that maybe it's dormant, it's not as active, the fire is not as strong as it was, but at the same time it's still there, and we need not forget where we came from. Otherwise, we're doomed to repeat, mistakes of the past, and that applies to pretty much all of humanity.
Yeah, I like what you said as far as making sure people that are being bullied or being taken advantage of at the playground come forward. This conversation seems to be placing a big percentage of the onus on those that can help, but we can't forget that the onus is also on people that need help. And one of the big reasons why I think we have termed ourselves as playground experts is not because we're better than anybody else, but it's because you and I have been bullied in different ways in different stages of our life, and we have valuable insight that can help people. But if people don't reach out, we can't help them. We're not in every playground on the planet, so we don't know what's going on. So I guess in conclusion, on my end, is reaching out to everybody listening to please encourage anybody you know that is being victim to reach out to our show, because we are ready and willing to help, but we don't know you need help.
Exactly. And I feel the same way, and I think it's important that people realize that with you and me being in a better position in life right now than we may have been, in a few months or a few years ago, that it still is on our radar. We're not doing this podcast because we need it. We're not doing it because we need it personally for ourselves. We're doing it because we feel that there's other people out there who are enduring some of the pain that we have, and there's ways that we could guide or empathize that maybe others can't, at least not in the same way. So again, yes, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll always be willing to listen to your feedback, read your feedback, and feel free to ask any questions or bring up any examples. Again, we'd be happy to share them on our show and to keep things anonymous. So with that, we'll sign out, and thank you guys very much for listening today. And again, always remember to speak up whenever you need any form of assistance, any type of help, and we'll be here to help out as much as we can, because again, we've been there just like what you're experiencing right now. Thank you.
Yep, this is Eric, the Eric and Mark Show. On behalf of both of us, again, encouraging you to reach out, whatever side of the fight you find yourself on, at ericandmarkshow@gmail.com.